That's very easy to answer because after I wrote the Vermeer, well, either while I was writing the Vermeer novel or just after I finished, I visited Philip Stedman. He is very well known for his book Vermeer's Camera, and that is a book which where he sort of explained his theory that Vermeer used a room as a camera, as a dark room, and he did all these amazing measurements by measuring the canvases that are known to exist of Vermeer's paintings. He calculated what he thought must be the way Vermeer probably used a camera obscura. So this means not a box, but an actual, like a room, a partition. So anyway, I can't remember if I had finished it or I was about to finish it, but he mentioned an article out of the blue. He mentioned Torrentius, who I'm not sure if I knew him, but he mentioned an article by somebody called Eric Barnoff. Barnoff, I'm not sure which, whether he was American or I'm not sure, but Barnoff is well known for writing about cinema and photography, maybe art as well. And he did an really exciting chapter in his book on Torrentius, and he said Philip Stedman recommended that I read that, and that was just really exciting. Now, the thing to be said is that the Polish poet Zbigniew Herbert also wrote about Torrentius in his collection of Apocrypha called Still Life with a Bridle. So Still Life with a Bridle is the famous painting which I'm writing about as well, the only extant painting. But I don't know if I had read that at the time. So basically, after I read, I think the thing about Barnoff's article is that it was a bit journalistic, but it was semi-academic. Maybe, it had enough references, and I spent years just following up all of those articles and books. And with the Herbert, I think he took more license. He wrote a book of anecdotes where I think he really it wasn't fiction, but in Herbert's case, he really dramatized it. I think he deliberately exaggerated and took stuff. I think, deliberately, purposefully, to make it dramatic. Whereas Barnos was, as I say, a bit more academic. So after I found out about all of the amazing history behind Torrentius's real life, and all these stories about the camera obscura, many more, I would say more anecdotal evidence about Torrentius using the camera obscura than you get with Vermeer. But having said, but basically, I read that book which Barnoff had mentioned, and I think her theory is very, very outlandish, and what I did was take the basic idea and just join these things together. There's a little bit of, I'm not 100% sure how clear her theory, but she seems to be implying all the time that there was a movement in Europe that would have Elizabeth of Bohemia, who was the daughter of James I and the sister of Charles England, join her with Frederick the Fifth of the Palatine. So one of the electors elects the Holy Roman Empire. Now they were both very, very Protestant at a time, when there were all these tensions between Protestants and Catholics in Europe. So, I mean, just the history is very interesting because the way I read her argument was that there was a kind of a movement to have a kind of maybe one religion that would unite everybody. I am interested in what you don't get in a novel is cinema, actual cinema. You don't actually get moving images, but you do get them in a kind of a magical way. I think in another idea, another novel, I might have a painter make films, which would be, well, I don't, maybe somebody has done it already, but I started with the idea of photography, and cinema is there. I think it's only hinted at. I mean, I think that Alcibiades, I think that you see a lot of cinema in it, which I can't see it myself so much, but I'm not surprised that it's there because I think about cinema all the time. But in terms of the actual subject matter, to have a novel that is kind of a fantasy novel, or let's say counter-historical novel, where if they had cinema in the 17th century, that would just blow my mind, But even if the thing about that period, I think, is because it was the period, the century of Newton, Hawkins' son. I can't help thinking that, maybe it could have been discovered 300 years earlier. I mean, it probably couldn't have done, but if it was possible 200 years later, I can't help thinking, why not? Why not in the 17th century? So that period is on the cusp of, possibilities of proto-cinema. That's my obsession. And to go back briefly to why I like Dutch painting or Northern Renaissance painting, the Dutch in particular are interested in trompe-l'oeil. So were the Italians, obviously, but I think that they got it in much smaller ways and all kinds of, in almost like special effects. I think it's there in so many paintings. So I think part of my theory is that if there had been cinema at the time, the Dutch would have been the Tarkovskys, and they would have been the Orson Welles, the Tarkovskys, the Mizoguchis of their time.